Treasurer, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
That's a pleasure.
Thank you. Now we're here today obviously to talk about this four-pillar economy that we're looking at. It was something that the government spoke a lot about before you came to government, and now I think we're really starting to see some of the benefits of that. Can you outline the ways you've delivered on that commitment?
Well, in terms of the four pillars, we talked about agriculture, tourism, resources and the property and construction sector. So in agriculture, our aim was to double farm gate production by 2040. In tourism, we wanted to double the spend to $30 billion by 2020. And in resources, of course, we know the story about resources, but reducing red tape, making it easier for projects to get going while still ensuring the highest environmental standards. And in the construction sector, by doing things such as reinstating the principal place of residence concession for people buying their family home, the Great Start grant that we've put in place, $15,000 for new home buyers buying new homes or apartments off the plan, giving them $15,000 to support the construction industry and also help Queenslanders get into their first home more easily. So we're well down the process of doing that, and of course the four pillars are supported by an underlying basis of education and knowledge-based industries. We need a good education system and a solid education system to provide the underlying support for those four pillars.
Right, and where does small business then fit into that? It's obviously we have quite a significant population of small businesses. How do they contribute to those four pillars?
Well, small business is vital to delivering on those four pillars that we talk about. Most farm production is undertaken by small business. Most of the business support services provided in Queensland for big resource projects is provided by small business. So it doesn't matter whether you're in Rocky or in Mackay, in Cairns or in Brisbane. Opportunities arise as a result of the growth in those areas. And in fact, in the first budget that the Newman government delivered, we also assisted small business by moving $500 million, I should say, of government spending out of government service providers into the private sector. So business had been coming to us for a long time saying, we can deliver these services and we can do them effectively and efficiently, just give us the chance. So in our first budget, we put $500 million worth of work that would otherwise have been done by government businesses out to the private sector.
Right, and I know for a fact that was welcomed by the business community. Do you think that we can see a move towards that in the future?
Well, very much so. The Commission of Audit report that came out recommended that the government test many of the things it does by the process of contestability. That is the government the best person to provide a service, or can it be done more effectively and more efficiently by someone else in the non-government sector? And that includes small and medium enterprises, but it also includes not-for-profit organisations, and that's very much part of the government's response to the Commission of Audit, and that is to go out and test the market and give opportunities to the small business sector to provide those services where they can be done effectively and efficiently.
Okay, and obviously a major reason we're here today is Small Business Week. The Queensland Small Business, or the Small Business Action Plan that the government has been working on, how can we capitalise on that as a plan and foundation for small business going forward?
Well, for small business, the first thing to do is to get a copy of that plan, because it does outline quite a number of the initiatives that the government is putting in place. For example, our red tape reduction effort is enormous. We're committed to reducing red tape by 20%, and in fact that was CCIQ's one of CCIQ's big three requirements, and we took that on board and listened very closely to that. My Assistant Minister Deb Frecklington and I have been working for 15 months to establish a baseline. We think we're getting there. Just working out how big government is a real task, and we've had people working on that for 15 months. So find out what's there and find out exactly what the government is doing to reduce red tape. For example, we've reduced the red tape for small businesses in the motor vehicle and workshop area, so they don't have to spend up to $6 million a year across all small businesses to get registration for something that we think essentially doesn't need to be done. We're doing it about government reporting, that is requiring companies to report back to government about outcomes, and we think there are great opportunities there to reduce that level of burden on small business.
Right, previous governments, we've seen a lot of commitment to red tape. They've probably let themselves down in the actual delivery of those commitments. How is your government doing things differently?
We've established the Office of Best Practice Regulation. Annually, they'll be providing a report to the Parliament on the government's effort to reduce red tape. So there'll actually be a publicly available measure that people can say, here's the level we started at, here's what you've achieved in the last 12 months, and people will be able to see that all the way through. So we'll actually make commitments to numbers and values, whilst still ensuring, though, that proper regulation is in place. So it's the best practice regulation that we're focusing on.
Okay, and in terms of the future for small business, we've just seen it in the most recent budget. I think it would be fair to say that some businesses thought they had a bit of a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we look in terms of competitiveness for the Queensland economy and particularly our small businesses?
Well, in terms of the fiscal principles of this government, one of our fiscal principles was to maintain Queensland as a low business tax state. And we measure that in the budget versus three different measures. One is a simple dollar measure, and we come off at about over $400 better off than the similar type of taxes in other states. We also measure it against the Commonwealth Grants Commission measure of effort, and we certainly are doing well in that measure as well. That is, in terms of taxes, we are below the average of all the other states. So, there's a third measure which looks at comparative values as well, a little more esoteric if I can put it that way. So on all of those measures we're doing well. Now, states only have limited number of taxes. Most of them are inefficient. They were developed over 100 years ago. Almost all of them are unpopular, and we acknowledge that, and I said that in my budget speech. So we're trying to get the balance right, but we believe by keeping taxes low, by focusing on the government's own fiscal repair task. Remember, we inherited a budget that was heading towards an $85 billion worth of debt. The fastest growing expense was interest expense. That was dead money, money that was being wasted. By doing those things, we believe we're providing a great environment for small business to be able to prosper. And we see that in some of our forecasts. So we see economic growth in Queensland at 3%, higher than every other state in Australia with the exception of Western Australia. And with the flow on from gas exports in about 2.5 years' time, will actually be higher than Western Australia in 3 years' time.
Right, and from a small business perspective, a bit closer to home for you, I'm a small business owner in Racecourse Road. Why should I have confidence in the Newman government over the next 3 years?
Well, I think you can have confidence in the fact that you see a fiscally responsible government that's reining in its own expenses. So we understand how important it is that you don't spend more than you're earning, and we've done that in the last financial year. Our expenses only grew by just over 1%, the lowest rate since accrual accounting was introduced to Queensland in 1998. As opposed to almost 9% expenses growth year on year in the lead up to it, which was quite simply unsustainable. You see it in the dedication to the red tape reduction effort, a thing that's going across all of government, and we are consistently driving that. And you see it in things like Small Business Week, where we actually have a week to celebrate the achievements of small business, to give them incentives, to give them an idea of what it is that's necessary for the government to do to be able to help them, those small businesses that are out there working away, providing jobs and employment for Queenslanders.
The Queensland plan has been a key focus of late. Where does that leave Queensland, and what do you see to be the benefits of that over the next 30 years? The
Queensland government, of course, is putting together the Queensland plan, a vision for Queensland for the next 30 years. Now, we're not saying we can predict the future, but what we're saying are what are the skills and abilities we need in place to be able to drive a vision for Queensland in 30 years. And we're inviting the entire Queensland community to have an input into it. In my own electorate, I've had a business forum where business people and our local Chamber of Commerce have come along to suggest their ideas. And I guess it's fair to say people see a significant change in the way Queensland operates. They see a government that is primarily around ensuring services are delivered and opening up opportunities for others to provide those services. They see a state that is moving on from just being reliant on simply resources, but to growing in those other areas of the economy. But also they see a state where government is not always putting its hand deeper and further into people's pockets, but making sure it's doing things efficiently so that business can get on doing what it does best. That's employing people, being innovative and expanding and growing.
Right, and a key message then appears to be, particularly from an economic sense, giving business a voice. So business owners coming to government and letting you know what they want. Is this a key value you've been working on? Very much so. We've established a number of cabinet committees, subcommittees of the main cabinet, around resources, around property and construction, around social services, where we actually invite people to come in and make presentations to senior ministers about the issues that affect them on a day-to-day basis. We're holding seminars around the state in relation to reducing red tape, and of course we engage more broadly with the community through our program of community cabinets, which have taken us the length and breadth of the state of Queensland, from Gundawindi to Cairns to Thursday Island, and of course other centres around the state. So we welcome engagement with the small business community. We are clearly saying that Queensland is open for business. We understand the pressures that small businesses face, and we're doing our best to help alleviate those pressures while also supporting the growth of those businesses. Treasurer, it's a very difficult trading environment for some of our businesses at the moment. Can you outline how things like LNG over the next few years are going to benefit the economy and where we can capitalise on that?
Look, we realise that over the last couple of years, times have been tough, particularly for small manufacturing and export industries. The high Australian dollar hasn't helped, and of course global uncertainty hasn't helped, and that's why it's important that the government demonstrates it's doing the right thing by controlling its own expenses and getting its own house into order. So we know that some small businesses have been doing it tough in recent times, and that's why red tape reduction is so important. But things such as the high Australian dollar have made it very difficult for our trade-exposed export industries. Our trading partners have been in some less than expansionary times, so we have to deal with those issues. But we see growth continuing. We see it doubling on the back of the LNG export industry from 3% to 6% by 2015, and that's an enormous boost for the Queensland economy. Our challenge will be to make sure it just doesn't sit in the export industry, that it is seen throughout the length and breadth of Queensland so that businesses can participate in that growth story. And that is a challenge for all of us. It's a challenge that the government is quite clearly focused on. We haven't stopped work on that. We need to continue to be able to do that. The other thing that we're doing, of course, is in my trade department, is refocusing Trade and Investment Queensland to provide an outwardly focused organisation that will provide opportunities for Queensland businesses to reach into those growth markets, places like Indonesia, where we'll be opening a new trade office in the next little while, places like China, of course, which is still growing at 7.5%, and will be taking a lot of our gas, as well as places like South Korea and India, where we're continuing to make inroads into those very large and profitable, hopefully, economies as they continue to grow.